The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So hi, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We've got an exciting program for you. I'm Peter Aiken. I'm one of the Associate Directors of the International Society, and I'm bringing you this webinar with my good friend and co-author, Ed Kelly. So happy that you can join us, Ed. I really appreciate you taking the time, particularly since you have literal operational duties and a meeting you cannot miss at the top of the hour. Am I correct?
That is absolutely correct, Peter.
Again, thank you for taking the time, and when we scheduled this, obviously a lot of other things have happened since then. So we got to know each other over the past couple of years, and one of the things we're going to talk about today is obviously Ed's focus here, which is that there's a lot of things that we do as data leaders, but the question of perhaps how we do them as data leaders may also be a very important topic here. So let me start off and do my best to introduce Ed Kelly. He's been working in this field for a long time. If you were looking for a well-rounded resume, it exists here in the sense that Ed has done data analytics, information, understanding them from a number of different perspectives here. Transplanted from Massachusetts to Texas a long time ago, and he has been adapting to Texas ever since, but nevertheless become an important part of the culture in and around Austin. 34 years married and a bunch of good offsprings as well, and when he's got time he spends it at the beach in the mountains. Ed, do you want to add anything to that? Because I was reading your slides.
That's quite all right, Peter, not a problem. Yeah, I think one of the things, my background, I've spent a number of years in the private sector. I started off there in a variety of different roles, and I think the opportunity that one has in having different types of responsibilities, it lends to build your career and really build your wisdom around what you do, particularly in this role here as a chief data officer for the state of Texas. The public sector positions as well, being the CIO for the Department of Public Safety, being a chief administrative officer for the Department of Agriculture. Those two positions were incredibly opportunistic in helping me to be successful in the CDO role. Coming into this, and I think it's real interesting to note that I walked into an absolute blank sheet of paper. There was nothing that was set out from a model or from a vision or roadmap perspective. And taking what I've learned through the years, both in the private sector and the public sector, have really helped me to become successful and help the program become very successful in the 5 years I've been in this role here. Peter mentioned, moving from Massachusetts to Texas. We were talking a little bit before we came online. Is quite a difference. For those of you who may not know the United States, I know there's some international people on the call perhaps. There's a lot of independency, or basically in Texas, we're very proud of who Texans. And I think that really shows in the way that we run our government, the way that we run our business and our government agencies and so forth. So that's another layer, I think, in working specifically with the kind of a decentralized model, because I don't really have any authority, so I have to do everything through influence and partnership and collaboration. So they're very important. As also Peter mentioned, I've been married 34 years and counting to the same woman. So that's great. We hope to have many, many more years. And my sons have been my pride for what they have become in life. Actually, the one that's in cybersecurity and the one that's in data actually work for my agency in different divisions. So I get to see them, I get to interact with them, and actually I've had them do presentations for me as a part of the executive leadership team, which is always kind of pride to see and hear your son stand up in front of the leadership and give a briefing. So spare time, yep, beach, mountains. I hope to get back there someday. I hope that we can do travel again. I hope that this pandemic is addressed quickly and we can be able to return to some type of a normalcy type of situation. So that's a little bit of the background. I want to put a little more color around it, just because I think today's discussion is really around some of those things. What, you know, they're not as technical, but they're people and process related. And I think a chief data officer, whether you're in the private sector or you're in the public sector, has to really hone their skills associated with these interpersonal skills and experience. So we'll talk more about it as we go through the presentation. I know, Peter, we're going to take questions along the way. Is that the thought process here?
Absolutely. Unlike most of the webinars that we have to do here, we do have a little bit of flexibility here. So if you guys have questions, by all means, drop them into the questions or the chat function there, and we'll put them out and see as much of a dialogue as we can get. And also, I wanted to highlight something else too. By virtue of the fact that you've been leading data efforts in the state of Texas for 5 years, this actually makes you one of the longest serving CDOs, period. And that's both a good thing. It's a testimony that you're able to survive in state politics, which is non-trivial. It also says that you're bringing some experience to the crisis which we're in right now, and we're going to branch out and look at both of those as we go a little forward on this. But the entire profession is, relatively speaking, starting to figure it out, and unfortunately, that makes you one of the wiser ones. I don't mean that badly, but we're looking to you for some wisdom here on this, because it is an area that we've got to start paying more attention to. Most CDOs do not last 3 years at this point. And there's some numbers we can go into them as well. As we go, though, I do want to let you talk a little more about Texas, because it is an amazing thing that you have to do down there, and the number of different topics that you keep in your head as a data person. You know, one time we're talking about game control management, next it's natural resources and water, and yet you've got industry that's coming in there as well that is making it phenomenal. So is that a good thing? We talk a little about Texas?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to flip to the next slide, I wanted to give the audience kind of a perspective here and the size of what we're dealing with here. If you look at the map, this was from a newscast that came out in October of last year. Literally, the top of Texas was snowing, and the bottom of Texas, people were sunbathing. That's the kind of the size and the scope of it. It's really hard to imagine it, second only to Alaska from a size perspective in square miles, 268,000. We have 29 million people here, probably close to 30 million. We were talking earlier, and Robert was saying that Canada, the entire country of Canada, has 30 million people. Well, in just our state, there's 29 million, 30 million. We have 254 counties. And I work with, in some degree, 180 state agencies and higher education institutions. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I've managed to be able to have and build a good relationship with many of them. And all of that has helped to continue to build the program. The other way we slice things up in this state is by regions. It depends on the agency that you wish to talk to. There are either 4 regions in the state, 6, 12, or 16, which also makes it very challenging from a management of data and organization. There's roughly 176,000 employees. And one of the last quotes I got from our chief technology officer, we managed 15 petabytes of data, and it's growing every day. So that number was just kind of a point in time number, but this is kind of what we deal with across the entire state. And there's other facts and statistics we could put out there, but it is a big, small country, I'll put it that way. And there's lots of diversity there. Those 180 state agencies and institutions of higher education have their own mission. And in a decentralized government model, they're all working toward their goals, objectives, and missions. And it's really hard to pull together an enterprise view of it. But we've had some success. I've been very happy with the 5 years that we've been able to kind of pull together some things at this particular level at the Office of the Chief Data Officer. So that's kind of the size of the world we deal with. Peter, any commentary or questions on that?
The size and shape is amazing, but let's actually sort of hone in on the material now. one of the things I'll start everybody off with is a statistic. First of all, we like a group called New Vantage Partnership. They do a very good data survey, and they do the same questions year after year, so we're able to see trends. And the last 2 years, they have asked people like Ed and others, what is the biggest problem areas that you have among people, process, and technology? And technology has fluctuated between 5 and 10% both years in a row. The reason that's important is because Ed said already, the people and the process aspects are what he can do successfully, what he has done successfully here in Texas. Again, imagine, a bunch of command and control type trying to do a bunch of very independent-minded data managers down there. What was the joke, Ed? How do you negotiate with that's it. Something about difference between a terrorist and a data modeler. We won't go into that. But anyway, you get where I'm saying on that. So with people and process being the problem, and that really does bring us to the subject material of the quick plug for the book that we need to do here. It's to say that, these are things that are much more important than being able to code in a format that you can do REST APIs in or configure your Spark clusters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the purpose and motivation behind writing this was that the individuals that collaborated on it all had experiences, life experiences, practical experiences, in what we wanted to do was share it. I mentioned earlier that when I walked in 5 years ago, it was kind of a blank sheet of paper, a kind of a loose group of people who have been doing this for a time. And I think the book will help others who are about to take this role on for their organization, for their company, for their state government, for their local government, what it be, as maybe as a few things to guide you along the way with people who have already walked down the road. We've stepped in the potholes, we've made the mistakes, and we've also had some great successes. And this book, I think, gives you some of that, for your review and maybe ways that you can implement those types of things into your own programs going forward.
Well, let's jump right in. So given that, first of all, I think it is a relatively surprising finding from you with direct experience, backed up by the research of the New Vantage Group here, that the people and the process issues are really important and perhaps under considered as part. Is that a good word to use for it?
Absolutely. I would say that probably back 5 years ago when I didn't know, and I thought it was a technology opportunity solution that needed to be put in play. But yes, it is certainly the relationship and the people and the overall change management philosophy of incorporating a data management program, because most organizations don't have it, or if they do, it's loosely fragmented and not centrally managed. So you got to look at it from educating the people and rallying around you. I mean, I think the biggest role that a CDO plays for an organization like the state of Texas is I am the evangelist for these efforts. I evangelize both at the agency level, I evangelize at the governance board levels, I also evangelize at the legislature. So our organization works with the legislature every year, and luckily over the last 3 sessions, we've had statute passed that has actually helped further the cause of the program. And I think that's a very, very important thing to look at. They are our super executive sponsors in helping us to kind of continue to grow and mature the program.
And can you describe a little more about that? Because first of all, the programmatic nature of data is something that many people pay lip service to without truly understanding. So the way I like to explain it to folks is that they say, well, when will you be done with the data? When will it be clean? When will it be fit for use? Whatever the criteria is that we're working towards. And I like to look at them and say, you'll be done with your data program when you no longer need your HR department. Nobody sits around and says, gosh, I think we've hired the last person that we're going to hire these days. And so, we can make all those people in HR redundant and save some money and put it into a more operational, mission-driven type of function. No, nobody says that. You will have HR until you close your doors. that equivalency has to be made in there in all of those comments on that. We're getting a quick question here. I don't know whether we want to dive into this one just yet. This is a friend and colleague here, and he's asking you about some political things about the data that exchanges between CDC and HHS. Do you want to disclaim that one broadly? Just to stay safe on that one, Ed?
Yeah, you know, I guess at this particular time and point where we are, you know, that we could take the rest of the time to talk about that. So I think I'd rather stay maybe focused on what the overview of the general presentation, and maybe even take that one offline, Peter. That'd probably be more appropriate, I think, at this time.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure I know who the questioner is, so we can call him directly if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. I just think that right now, you know, I did want to go back to this slide though about success and challenges, and this is basically. These illustrations are exactly, at least for our state, what we have been through. I mean, all of the successes that we have had, and the reason this picture was chosen is that there are multiple people here, right? It is not by yourself standing on top of the mountain, raising your hands in success. It is because of others is why we have been successful in everything we do, and whether it be an artifact or a work product that we produce, whether it be a standard, whether it be some type of an organization or a collaboration effort, it is all about the multiple individuals who have helped us to be able to rise to the occasion and get there. Now, on the other side is obviously the famous picture of Sisyphus and you know, rolling the boulder up the hill, because this is hard work. This is changing culture. This is getting people to think differently. This is doing the hard work about managing data that has not maybe been managed for many, many, many years, or is on antiquated pieces still of equipment that need to eventually be upgraded. So, you know, I think the biggest thing that we've recognized is that there is lots and lots of success, but there's lots and lots of challenges. So, you know, painting the picture for everyone in the audience is to let them understand that this is really kind of I won't call it a love-hate, but it is it's a lot of work. But at the end game, when you finally get it done, everyone celebrates, because that's the most important part of it going forward.
And Ed, when you say celebrate, you know, you're still talking about a staff of less than half a dozen, are you not?
I wish. No, it's actually myself and one other person.
There you go.
So, yeah, so it's just the two of us.
$1 budget. You don't have an R&D consultant.
No, we do not. No, we've never had that. But you know, between my colleague Tammy and I, we feel really good about our program every day, because we challenge each other to come up with ideas, to be creative, to think outside the box, and to try. Now, everything we try isn't successful, you know, but overall we try to bring to our customers something that created value, something that helps them do their job better. We even speak to their executives sometimes, advocating why this is important and why it's so it's another voice. We're almost like an internal consultant for my customers, for the individual agencies and higher education folks. So we play a variety of different roles, and again, I think it's you know, we're a small but mighty team. I'll call it that way. So,
and any data leader coming into a situation that was essentially ungoverned prior to the leader showing up is going to be facing some similar types of challenges. It's not just you want me to do things different, but you also have to tell me why you want things to be different. So again, as I mentioned, a number of organizations at the beginning, and I wasn't picking on anybody, but these were absolutely critical in terms of helping organizations start to understand where they can go for this type of resource. And Ed, you came from a very broad technology background. So given the successes and challenges that you've been talking about here, what can we sort of summarize in the context here to say, we've got to make a bunch of changes for these folks. how is that process made easier or harder by different personality types that come into this?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's twofold. If we can skip to the next slide, I think you have these kind of underlining challenges that everybody has to deal with in coming in with a new idea. And data management is somewhat of a new idea in a lot of organizations. So fundamentally, you have different people with different preconceived ideas on how to do it. If you could change the slide, Pete, that'd be great. I think we skipped. I'm sorry, go back on, please.
My apologies.
No, just mine.
The one that's,
Thank you.
across
the board, this is what you're up against. You're up against people prioritizing this and putting it in front of, something that else is very important. You're challenged with time, people's time. They only have so much time in the day. They only have so much attention time in the day. So you got to be able to get them to understand that if you put some effort and time into these exercises, into these process changes, that at the other end of it, you're going to have much easier time in managing it. Resources, you mentioned it earlier, Peter, even at the state level, we have 2 people. The other agencies now are starting to hire agency chief data officers, which is a really good thing. So my colleagues in the agencies who have been hired to drive the strategy and the vision around data management, and these are talking some of these large agencies, Health and Human Services, the Department of Public Safety, Texas Department of Transportation, and ERS, our employee retirement systems, the people that manage all of our budget, not our budget, our pension accounts, which I'm kind of glad they have that person in there. But in any case, there is a lack of trained, experienced people in handling this, and we're only now trying to recognize in the office of the Chief Data Officer, how can we increase data literacy? This is one of the areas that we've done some spot things along the way, but I think it's so important to have a formalized education training program so that when people come on board, they know what to do, they know what to anticipate, and they have the tools to be able to do it. Some of my colleagues, I've been kind of through the state CDO network asking about what they're doing, and we're getting some great feedback from like Virginia and Arizona and New York, and some of those things that they've learned are helping Texas develop its program. The other things that are very, kind of out there, and they're always out there, is the cultural challenges, the political challenges, the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Muscle memory, people got kind of accustomed to doing things the same way. And then optics, frankly, if you start to look and peel back the onion on your data, you start to see things that maybe aren't as attractive. And how do you address those? So you got to look at these things as a chief data officer, and this is what you have to walk into. Not only that, but layer on what you said, Peter, is the personalities, the individuals of how and what they think about when it comes to the mission of their agency and data management, and where does that fall. So it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of again, I'll call it, optics and politics, culture, personalities, and then just really trying to figure out where in the scope of every day, how this fits into being addressed.
Ed, we've got actually a bunch of questions coming in here, so thank you guys for participating. I'm definitely not ignoring you. It was interesting though, Ed, as you were talking, we got a question around data literacy, so I'm going to try to lead you a little differently through some of the material that we covered. The questions were coincident. If you had seen my screen, you'd have woven them in perfectly, but I want to make sure we do address them. So first of all, were there any schools in Texas teaching good data management courses? I don't mean you to put anybody on the spot specifically, but certainly are there resources that you go to or programs that you go to?
Yeah, certainly. There are some great programs. We've had conversations with the University of Texas, We've had conversations with Texas A&M, which are kind of the two bigger organizations out there. We've also had conversations at the community college level. The Austin Community College has a program around data management and technical data. And I actually served on a advisory board in helping to define that probably about 2 or 3 years ago. So education, universities, colleges, community colleges recognize that this is going to be a long-term position, a long-term career for people, and they're starting to turn out individuals with degrees in these areas. So great feeder ground for both the private sector and the public sector going forward. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't personally interact with them too much. I think between Tammy and I, we have so many other things we're dealing with right at this moment. That might be a goal and objective in our next biennium as far as we go forward. So.
And again, you've established the cooperation and the thought processes as well, and I've seen some of the results of that pay off. Another question specifically is focused on data literacy around the executive. Is that a challenge for you as a chief data officer, and have you been able to make or highlight efforts around data literacy around the state of Texas?
Yeah, you know, for what we've tried to do, is particularly with the executive levels, is to work it off in different sections. So that we have a state agency coordinating council for all the general counsels, all the legal people in the state. So working with that element, we've certainly worked with the CIOs directly, because our agency has a direct relationship with every single CIO. So we kind of handle that executive level. We don't have as much conversation with the executive directors. I'd like to do more of that. I have had kind of one-offs with individual executive directors, but nothing that's really nothing like the other two organizations, right? Where there is a kind of a center point to come in and to have those dialogues and have an opportunity to present and talk to them about the program and how and what offerings we have through the program. You know, we've had some great success with the legal people. They have helped the overall program tremendously through data sharing. And I have a slide coming up to talk a little bit about that, but it's really amazing what's happened with the legal community and their support of the program, again, and through the data sharing efforts. So we've done a number of things, but they're not at the very highest level within state agency leadership. So
a couple more questions coming in here. Thank you for answering that. How do you get other C-level peers to become partners and advocates for your charter to break down data silos and democratize data across the state? Well, that sounds like a planted question. I won't accuse you of that, Ed, but that's a good one. You want me to read it again?
There wasn't anybody on my team, I don't think. So,
Joe, read it again? You got it.
Yeah,
okay,
so, you know, I look at this, you know, job as a heavy get off your seat, go out there, shake hands, and understand what the customer's priorities and challenges are. Prior to the COVID pandemic, and we had a lot of opportunity to go visit to people's offices, to participate in some of their training and planning sessions, to really be that partner, to really understand, look, you know, here's some things we want to give you as tools and help you. I mean, I'm actually sit on the interview panels to hire data officers across the state. So I'm already, you know, working with the CIOs and to helping to establish the hiring of a person, the perfect person for them to help lead the initiatives going forward. So some of the other parts of that question have yet to accomplish. I think the maturity level of different agencies are obviously at different points, and we're still growing from a maturity level perspective. So we're not actually there to break down all of the barriers, but we have done some use cases that have done it and seen some success and seen some hard numbers that we use in our reporting and particularly our testifying to the legislature on the progress of the overall program.
For those of you that haven't worked in a state government environment, for the circle that Ed has put together, actually the circle is the feedback loop. What he's describing by going and visiting people, he also knows that some people are influential in different ways than other people are. And so he knows how to do those patterns, and then that will result in additional focus, time, and effort. And Ed, you mentioned a couple of laws that have been passed in there as well. I've got tons of questions here for you. I don't want to cut your presentation short in any way, Foreman. I know you've got a hard stop. You tell me, where should we go next on that?
Well, I mean, I think if people are asking questions, I'd like to take those, and I can get through the next series of slides quickly.
Super. So with respect to that, question is, how important is the data architecture to your success, and what is your desired data architecture? I'm not quite sure that question is exactly, but certainly you work with data architects in most of the agencies you're with. And
yeah, so yeah, I'm sorry, Pete. Yeah, the ones that have them, basically, as I mentioned earlier, those agency data management officers, we've adopted the DAMA principles in the state Texas data management framework, and working with those agency data management officers, part of that is understanding the architecture, the roadmap to which they wish to develop their own individual programs. One example I have is the Department of Public Safety. Gentleman, he just completed his data architecture and has worked with me back and forth vetting it to fine tune it before he does the final presentation to his executive management. So again, you know, I guess the question is really, we advocate all of the key principles through the framework, and architecture is critical, and it's particularly critical as it overlays with the IT architecture and the future of kind of those two melding together. In working with the individuals like the gentleman from the Department of Public Safety, his architecture is just that. It incorporates that overlay between data and IT. And I think he's supposed to present that last week or the week before to his leadership. So that's kind of where we kind of play, is advisors in this role in helping others be successful and to implement.
And given the breadth of your remit, how else would you be successful otherwise? 2 people for the entire 30 million citizens of the state, right? It's just not the right number on that. Got a comment here, Ed. The UNTHSC at Fort Worth has a good public health program with an emphasis on data management. So some people are looking for that. Health data management is a tremendous career. And you also mentioned the community colleges. And I think that one of the things we're trying in DAMA, but we may be looking for some state partners on, is to try to get some data governance. Data governance sort of feels like an associate's degree. And there's probably some very, very good work that we can do there that will help both the security area, but also the general data literacy area from a community college perspective there. So thank you for the statement on that. Next question here is, for starting CDOs, what's the biggest problem everybody is facing? And I think they're asking in terms of the Dimbach wheel that you just mentioned, which is why I asked the question there. Do you have a section of that you look at every day and say, oh, you're the bad one, and if I could get around that? Or is it really more across the board because of the nature and variety of the type of tasks that you have to keep running in the state?
Yeah, it's really the latter from my perspective. I think, you know, one of the things we've tried to do, again, everyone's at a different level. You know, the Health and Human Services group is a little bit further, more advanced in their data roadmap. They have a chief data officer. They have done they have a governance model they've implemented on their Medicaid program. They've done their inventory associated with it. So, you know, they're further down the road, but it is really more of a shotgun approach. You know, again, with the staff that we have and the resources we have, we've created some general things to help everybody kind of understand all the components of the DAMA wheel, but we're not advocating one over the other. Now, with that, I take a little step back to say that what we'd like to do and what we're looking to do is to identify 4 key modules and put more emphasis and training around them right now. So governance, architecture, quality, and then data ethics and handling. I think ethics and privacy are huge right now. There are topics in everything, particularly with this pandemic. And I think in the next legislative session, which is coming up on January 1st, we are going to be asked questions around this. So a lot of what we do is planning and preparation for our legislative session that comes in every 2 years. So the topic I envision this year is going to be around that. So if we can establish a program, a training program, that module, along with the other ones in the next 3 months or so, and start offering them to our community, when we do reporting at the whether it be the Senate Finance or the House Appropriations or whatever we're called to testify on, we'll highlight some of those things as important pieces of the advancement of the program overall. But it really is dependent on who I'm working with. Smaller agency, getting back to the original question, they just started. They just want to know how to set up an awareness program or how to get involved in the open data program that we run. So it really is dependent on who we're talking to on any given day.
So it sounds like a range of offerings from advanced to entry level that you can easily roll out for people that are just getting started in the entire process. And that seems to have been a core component of your architecture that you've put together.
Correct. Yeah. And the reason I also want to be flexible, I don't want to go in there with a prescribed kind of approach on stuff. One of the biggest things that, and I do talk to this a little bit, is listening for understanding of what people's pain points are. What are they looking for help with? What are they looking for your experience to come augment their team? If you come in as a CDO with, okay, here's what we're going to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're going to get people turned off because they may not be interested in your thought process of how it should be done. You could advise them, you could, provide them with kind of a guidance, but you need to listen too. You need to work with those individuals to determine what's best for them, because that's how you gain credibility, that's how you gain respect, that's how you provide value to them. And every agency, whether it be whatever the 180 that we work with, it's what is important to them, because if you get their success, if you get to be their trusted resource for them, then now you can start to apply the other practices and work with them going forward.
So we got another question in here, and just a comment, Ed. Somebody's saying that they're actually able to relate to this because they've been in a similarly large and bureaucratic organization parallel to yours. So a compliment. It's very nice to get in the middle of this. The question here, though, is really, how does not invented here affect your work? Do you have that type of process where it's, I guess, parochial within agency, which certainly states experience it, certainly organizations experience it as, this department created it here, but they don't really know what they're doing, so we're going to have to reinvent it. How does that play into your world?
Yeah, that's an interesting quote there, not invented here. I translate that in our world as, we've never done that before, right? Or we tried that one time and it didn't work, right? So I think what you have to, for those individuals that come in with that kind of approach where they really want to be the designer, they want to be the developer, they want to be that, that's great. I'm giving them a roadmap, but I'm not telling them how to get from Austin to Dallas. They can get there any way they want. If they want to design it themselves, that's great. But frankly, a lot of them have taken us up on the tools and the experience we have to guide them. I don't get much not invented here as much as I get, we've never done that before, or, that type of thing. So okay. And once you get past that, you can really move forward a little bit on all fronts, I think. So
super. One of the other questions that pops in on a regular basis is the mine. They call it the data mining problem. So there's the data mine, which is the process of going through data and trying to uncover interesting, useful, and valuable patterns. But then there's also the it's my data problem, and that mining is a component. So have you seen that as a major barrier for exploitation? And you're at least in a state, so you can say it all belongs to the great state of Texas, or do you find that that parochial component is a problem? And Ed, just a time check here. We've got about 10 minutes before you need to start getting ready for your next real world meeting on this. I want to make sure we can cover the remaining material that you have as well as the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that we personally have not experienced that as much as my colleagues that are running the individual programs at the agencies. And we've had dialogue about how to get over that barrier, what to do about it. I won't name names, but there are individuals that are struggling with that right now. So part of the process is getting them involved sooner than later. Obviously, listening to them, as I talked about it before. When you solicit input around that, you need to apply it to your model so that they understand that they were heard and that you have thought through it and incorporated it where applicable, so that it is a joint buy-in on the process. I think the CDO doesn't do well unless they have a executive order that they own all the data. That's not going to sell. It certainly doesn't sell in Texas. So you've got to work the different angles of that with your customers, and you've got to involve them, and you've got to participate with them so that the product was one that came from both mindsets.
Ed, I'm not a parent, but I'm detecting parenting skills being a useful component of the process, or at least appropriate parenting skills, maybe is the way to say it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that going on as well. I mean, I think you just pull the skill set out of your toolbox when you need to apply it, and it's not. I don't think it's really rocket science. It's just really understanding people and working with
we don't
people.
do it well, though, Ed. I mean, I hate to interrupt you like that, but I've seen so many technology managers. I worked with an individual who went on from becoming a very skilled person in his own domain to becoming a chief data officer, and he was going to put Hadoop all over the world, and it was going to be solved in a year from now. We wouldn't have anything that was not Hadoop. He lasted exactly a year, and at that time he went back to his previous career where he was good at it. I think that it wasn't so much that he didn't succeed. I think it was because he had a brash and abrasive style that the rest of the group said, I just don't want that person in meetings anymore. I don't care what we're talking about or what we're doing. And I think that's a seriously important component of some of the things we have to address.
Yeah, that's a death sentence, in my opinion, for any position, really. Arrogance doesn't take you far. It actually doesn't at all. So, well, I think I'd like to just roll through the next slides, Pete, real quick, if we can do that. One of the things we talked about was understanding customer priorities, and I've touched upon this a lot, but this was a model I picked up and modified a little bit. This is actually a sales model, right? This is selling something. And to present the opportunity in the middle was really just make the sale, right? But you need to do your research before you go into the customer. Who are they? What's their mission? Luckily in government, we have a plethora of information you can find on them. I go in and look at their organization charts. I look at their mission, their statements, their vision, understanding what's the most important. Then we shape the story because we have to customize it. I'll use the example of our open data portal. Tammy Powell, who is our open data portal administrator, we work at taking the customer's data from their public website, bringing it into our open data portal product. And then when we do the demo and presentation, we're actually showing them their data and how it would look. So we're shaping that story as we have done through all of our briefings. And then the opportunity itself is really, what is it? It's the sale, if you want to look at it. How do you then retain that customer? And that's the relationship building. And then now you want your customer to be an advocate for your program, to be speaking on behalf of you. So now that individual talks with another agency and says, hey, this is a pretty good deal. You ought to get these guys in for a conversation going forward. So that's the sales journey, but it is the customer journey when it comes to data management from our perspective.
Just going to interject here. If you've been through a purely technical program, you've never seen this model before. So again, it's a challenge for us all in the questions. We still got more questions, Ed, but I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I'll just roll through the last, this also one of the things that we put out there was the golden rule, equaling programs to success. We really believe this, giving respect, not just showing respect, but giving it, really giving it, and making sure that the individuals understand that. Listening, I touched upon that and how important that is. Being genuine, really, you've got to be a person that's respected that is coming forth and really an advocate of their program as well as the advocate of the overall state program. And then follow up and follow through. I mean, there's so many times I've worked with organizations that what happens after the meeting is ended, you never see anything, you never hear anything, and it just dies. I am a big advocate of making sure we follow up with the proper emails, thank yous, documentation, whatever we said we were going to do, just do it. Because if you do all these things, you're following the whole program of the golden rule, do unto others as they would do unto you, right? Nobody wants to be left hanging if you said you were going to do something for them. So this is how we structure our program success going forward. And then the next slide I have is one that kind of talks about a use case. We talked about one of the things that my mantra is patience and persistence. When you work in a government organization, you can expect to have things happen too fast or too soon. And that can't happen. You've got to be patient, but you have to be persistent too, because you're the only one that really can see the value. And sometimes it takes a while for others to see the value. The use case here is the Texas Statewide Data Exchange Compact. Back in 2016, we ran an executive survey that said, what are the top barriers to data sharing? And if you can look at these, it might be hard to see, but privacy, duties of confidentiality, security, and legal. Rolling that all together, it actually was legal overall. And what we did was we talked to the state agency coordinating council for legal, the general counsels, and we developed a uniform data sharing agreement. And this is an agreement signed by state agencies that eliminates what I'll call the standard blocking and tackling rules that every legal department has to deal with. So it helps agencies get to the data sharing at the program level. And it eliminates the first 6 months sometimes of an agency A and agency B having to go back and forth and arguing between legal departments on definitions or what have you. So as an agency signs this, they can go then broker with another agency who has signed it and get right to the conversation around data sharing at the program level. And now we have 5 universities of higher education that have also signed it. So this started off really, really slow, and now almost every 2 weeks we're getting a request for the TISDEC to be signed and put in place. So I'm very encouraged. This is one of those patience and persistence. Very encouraged now that we're starting to see the turn about how valuable this particular tool could be for agencies. So
absolutely.
I'm going to kind of get that at a high level. So
sorry, I was just going to add, Ed, you said 6 months. I've seen it stretch out for a year in some cases as the wrangling occurs. So again, putting in place one size to fit them all does work in this case for this use, and you're seeing lots and lots of uptake on that as well.
Right, absolutely. And then my last slide in my deck is just the incremental improvements. How do you do that? How do you create value? Expressing gratitude. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for my staff member, how thankful I am for my agency and the leaders I work with at my agency, and the individuals that help make the program special every day. Create meaningful tools and work products. Don't create something just because you got to check a box. Look at the way you're creating these documents and these products and say to yourself, how, if I was in an agency or higher ed, how would I apply this? How would I make it useful for me? We talked about soliciting and using input. Make sure, if it's one thing to solicit input, but then you need to use it. Not in every case or not in every situation, but if you don't use it, go back to the person that provided it and let them know why. So close that communication loop. And then lastly, you know, my most important thing is live and act by your words. If you say something, you know, be honorable, be, you know, dedicated, be that individual that doesn't leave people hanging. And I think, you know, if you kind of apply maybe some of these things in your world as a CDO, you'll find that you'll quickly gain respect. You'll quickly be able to get people behind you and support your overall program.
Perfect. And we've got two questions that have popped in. I want to try and make sure we can get them in as well. First question has to do with, is probably pretty simple for you. Do you provide a template for your agencies to conduct a data audit? That sounds like it's a very specific Texas question, so I'm guessing they're probably asking what can you provide, and maybe the best thing to do would be to urge them to reach directly out to you.
Yeah, that's probably, I'd like to learn a little bit more context around that one, and I'd be happy to. We don't, you know, we've looked at conducting a data maturity assessment audit, I'll call it, across the enterprise, but we recognized that it was too soon. We've recognized that a lot of agencies are still in that 0 to 1 level, right? And we want to give people time to build their programs up to be able to do more, so that when we come in with a data maturity assessment, you know, we're more in the middle, in the 2, 3, or even maybe 4 level as far as getting all the components lined up. So we didn't want to take the time to do that just yet, but I see that's forthcoming.
Got it. And the other question that we have here is pertaining to FIPA. I'll just try to do a quick summary of FIPA. Is a law that was passed in January of last year when the government was shut down, and it mandates essentially that all data on the federal government's level is open by default, so protection by exception. Second, it mandates the use of chief data officers throughout the federal government, and more importantly, it qualifies as chief data officers for objective characteristics, non-political appointments, and more importantly, they cannot serve the CIO function at the same time. This is now the new law. The third one is that it talks specifically about improving the quality of data that is used in federal government decision making. So you'll hear a lot of talk about FIPA Ed. The questioner wants to know, has Texas seen any discussion around that, and probably you have a reaction to it?
Well, you know, I guess we've nibbled around the edges on some of those. So, you know, open data, we've had laws on the books most recently that passed around making government data more transparent. Our open data portal in Senate Bill 819 in the last session was designated as the statewide dedicated portal. It's still encouraging agencies to leverage it. I think in the next session, we'd like to have a little bit stronger language to be able to assist that, but to make all data open and available in a machine readable format going forward. And that's with some of the language in that bill going forward. As far as the chief data officers, you know, again, we last session tried to get language in a bill that was specific around that. It didn't pass, but agencies are now going ahead and doing it without compliant, without a statute. They're going ahead and hiring the people because they've recognized the importance of the role. In the next session, maybe there'll be something that gets more specific and requires that agencies do that. So chief data officers are coming in Texas. I'm actually on an interview panel starting tomorrow for one of our agencies who's got several candidates they're hiring as a data officer. And right now it's word of mouth. People are seeing the value and opportunity in this role for them. So so we got that one. The other one around data quality, you know, I think that obviously data quality is critical to doing any type of analytics, any type of gaining insights and mining information and being more predictive in your decisions using data. You know, we've seen that most recently with where we're at today, and also in other situations. So I think that that's a situation that's kind of an ongoing thing that agencies have been struggling with, or in some case doing, over the years. I mean, when I was a CIO, in my positions, we address data quality issues and we work them. And I think IT leaderships in the agencies are doing just that as a part of the kind of standard operating procedures of their day-to-day life. So.
Well, Ed, I've got 7 more topics that I would try to cover with you if we had the time, but I do know that you have a real job and we need to let you go to get to it. So I want to thank you for taking time to share this with us. And again, some of that wisdom is in the book, but maybe we can bring you back for a second shot at the apple here if we can sometime.
That'd be great, Peter. I enjoyed it very much, and I want to thank you for your opportunity here and your time, and wish all of the CDOs that are on the call all the best of luck.
You bet. Thanks, Ed.
All right.
Everybody.